We have the best military, the most powerful, most lethal military in the world by far. Earlier this year, in a stunning display of American military strength and skill, we apprehended the outlaw Victor, you know this, from Venezuela, named Nicolas Maduro, and brought him to face American justice. He's been killing people for a long period of time with drugs and everything else, but killing people, a violent man.
Well, President Trump discussing the capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, who is due back in court in Manhattan later today. Now, Maduro and his lawyers are going to try to convince a federal judge that the U.S. government is interfering with his defense by not allowing Venezuela to pay his legal fees. Now, this is happening as interim President Delcy Rodriguez pitches her country's newly opened oil reserves to private investors in Miami. Here's what she says, quote, "We are in a process of stabilization, implementing the reforms needed for a productive environment and to attract investments that will diversify the engines of the Venezuelan economy. When we consider a barrel of oil, its production cost, 64% of that barrel has room for negotiation with the investor regarding royalty reductions, income tax reductions, and most importantly, the dividends that the investor receives. If there's a large investment, obviously the return's going to be higher on that 64%. Joining me now, CSIS Americas Program Director Ryan Berg. Ryan, I want to get your reaction to her pitch that she made in Miami. It seems on the surface to be a pretty fair deal.
Good morning, Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be with you. Indeed, the Delcy regime is touting some of the changes it's made to the hydrocarbons law 2 weeks after the daring raid and special forces operation that removed Nicolas Maduro from that country and whisked him to New York to face charges of narco-terrorism. But there's another meeting that's going on this week in Houston, which is CERAWeek, arguably the biggest energy forum in the world. And that's a forum at which the Nobel laureate and opposition leader Maria Corina Machado is speaking at. And if you listen to what's been said at that meeting, oil executives are certainly interested in what's happening in Venezuela, Cheryl. They're delighted to see that 20 years of nationalization under Hugo Chavez have been reversed. But they've also highlighted some areas where they think that this law is actually deficient. And her statement actually gets to everything you need to know, Cheryl, is that there's a lot of discretion there for the elements of this regime that still remain in Venezuela to decide how they want to negotiate with individual companies licensed to do deals in Venezuela. And I think a lot of oil executives would like that to be permanent as opposed to up to a negotiation with the regime. That's the kind of stability and guarantees that they'd like to see before they start pouring billions and even hundreds of billions into Venezuela to resurrect this moribund oil industry.
Well, then is that something that the Trump administration should be more involved in, considering that it is the Trump administration that took out Nicolas Maduro? It is the Trump administration, and we know that Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, he's been down to Venezuela. Other officials we know have been down there. So if Delcy Rodriguez is the choice, does this go back to the Trump administration for further, I guess, clarification to your point about the concerns from these oil executives?
Well, I do think that we do need to take into consideration the amount of time that's elapsed. Next week, Friday, will be 3 months. So you don't undo 27 years of horrific socialist policies in 3 months. And I would argue that the Trump administration has made tremendous progress in just short of 3 months. But I do think that the United States needs to continue pushing for security and stability in a number of sectors in which it would like to see greater investment, principally the oil sector. You don't get Venezuela moving again. You don't get Venezuela prosperous again as a country unless its oil sector is booming again as it was in the late 90s before Hugo Chavez took over. That is going to need more work.
No, well, certainly. I mean, there's a lot of disrepair. I mean, it's not just the oil fields and the wells, et cetera. It's also the electrical grid in Venezuela. It's all in disrepair, and the money that's going to be spent. I understand that the private sector could do that. But I also agree there needs to be some guarantees put in place here. Fair concern. Well, I mentioned the Interior Secretary, Mr. Burgum. He is eyeing more opportunities for investment and trade agreements in Venezuela. But in the mining sector, listen to him yesterday.
There hadn't been a shipment of precious metals between Venezuela and America in over 20 years. We had, at the end of the 2 days, we were able to bring home $100 billion of gold, physically, the gold, to bring back for U.S. refiners for commercial and consumer purposes. The potential is huge, and in traditional minerals as well. They have enormous coal resources. In that coal, there's critical minerals, the precious metals we talked about. But the mining opportunity, I mean, that's an industry that's been in complete collapse. They want a clean environment. They want to have modern investment. And they want to see growth in their country. So very optimistic.
Ryan, same question. They want to see investment.
Yeah, and I think that they're right to want to see investment in the critical mineral space, Cheryl. There's tremendous opportunity that Venezuela has, and Venezuela is one of the most mineral-endowed countries in the Western Hemisphere, and it has a number of minerals that other countries do not have in addition to gold. As we speak, the Venezuelan National Assembly is working on a reform to the mining sector laws that will, I think, look pretty similar to the reforms that they made to the hydrocarbons law, trying to open up spaces for private sector partnerships and to provide greater stability and security. The one thing I would note on this, Cheryl, is that mining is, by its very nature, a much longer-term industry, and so it looks for even greater amount of stability and security in the investment space than, say, in the oil sector, just because of how long it takes to develop a mine. And so when we talk about reigniting Venezuela's critical minerals potential, it's a much longer timeline than the oil sector, which already was a very vibrant sector before Hugo Chavez took over. And so I think it'd be much easier to revitalize that sector than the mining sector long term. But the administration is absolutely right to be looking to both of these sectors as engines of Venezuela's future prosperity.
Absolutely. And there's no question to anyone that there's amazing resources in Venezuela, but it's the political, and I point back to my earlier comment about the infrastructure in Venezuela. Those are real concerns, and this is not something that's going to be rebuilt in a day. It's going to take years. Before you go, it looks like Venezuela's leadership is cooperating with the Trump administration to open up their markets to global trade and investment. So just in general, what kind of timeline do you think this is, and what kind of, again, guarantees do you think that the U.S. needs so that we have this relationship with Venezuela, which is completely different than the relationship we had with Nicolas Maduro?
Yeah, it's a great question, Cheryl, because the question about the investment timeline is also overlaid with another important timeline, which is the election schedule, which administration officials have said needs to come at some point to solve the political legitimacy question that Delcy Rodriguez suffers from. We know that there needs to be an election at some point in Venezuela. And so on the investment timeline, we're already starting to see companies make some of their first deals, not of the magnitude that will be needed to resurrect the industry completely, but certainly wading into this new investment regime. And then on the elections timeline, if you listen to the opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, she says, as soon as we start talking about elections, it will likely take 9 to 10 months to actually set the proper conditions for a free and fair election that can solve the political legitimacy questions remaining in Venezuela. So very important to take in mind that we've got these two timelines that are kind of overlapping with one another and actually have an interplay with one another.
We'll be covering it. Ryan, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.